All right, guys, behind me is my 1997 BMW M3. It is a Estoril 4-door with black interior, and it doesn't have a sunroof. So BMW people call that a slick top. It's pretty rare. We don't know production numbers back and forth. We call this a one of one. It's probably not, but it is still really rare to have a factory blue car with a factory black interior, and then on top of that to not have a sunroof. And this is actually the stiffest car on the E36 lineup. Was the 4-door slick top with a fixed rear seat. This is what the DTM cars were in Germany. Those were all 4-cylinder race cars, but it was kind of the same thing. This is the one they chose to race. This was the stiffest E36 chassis. I made friends with the angry ass guys, Brent and Greg, when I bought an E34 M3 shell and kind of just got to know them. Brent owned this car, and before him, a guy named Roland, who did a lot of maintenance on this stuff. I've never met Roland, just heard good things about him. It was his car. It was an automatic, and it started to have transmission issues. He sold it to Brent. Brent was all about it because it's a slick top. He's all into weight reduction and race car things, so this was right up his alley. Brent started working on moving to Texas, which is where he resides now with his wife, and needed to get it gone. So he hit us up first, hit up Will actually. Will purchased the car with the slipping automatic trans. Around the same time, I just started getting the E36s, and I actually had a clone M3. It was a 318, I believe, but had it was a 95. It had an S50 in it. It was also a 4-door, but it had Vaders, all the trailing arms, the diff, all the body panels. It looked to be an M3. Somebody really wanted that car, so I sold it, and I was like, man, I kind of missed this. I didn't think I would, so I hit up Will. During that time, Will had already manual swapped his car, so then it had a 5-speed. It was good. It wasn't totally complete, but it was pretty good. We came to terms at $6,500. So like, I thought that was pretty fair. That's like, it was. The paint was a lot cleaner then. I didn't know it was resprayed at the time. The respray has kind of failed a little bit at this point. That year was our first year doing this stuff. This was 2018. I wanted to take this car to Drive Four Corners at the end of August, and I was hell-bent on doing it. Well, I was driving the car back and forth to work, enjoying it. It did great, except one day the belt came off. I don't know if the belt just fell, and I was just like, oh, the light's on, whatever, this is dumb me. I'm like, it'll be fine. I'm just a couple miles from the shop, I'll drive it. I got it here. It was pretty deep in the red by the time it was here, and I was like, it'll be okay. I put a new belt on, tried bleeding it, put a new thermostat in, did everything I could, and it seemed to like get slightly better. All things was like, every time I would do something, I'd be like, oh, this is the failure point. Oh, this is why it's leaking. Oh, this, and this. Long story short, it just kept pressurizing the cooling system, and it just kept finding the next weakest link. So it was just over and over again, which we've now come to find is super common on these. Once you get them hot, the head cracks, and it's pretty much over. I didn't end up taking it. I took my white GTR instead, and we put BMW badges on it and called it the 826 CI, and like we had a blast, and it was a hell of a trip. But I was like, I love this car, and I'm gonna bring it back. So I waited a whole year though to do anything with it, and I decided we're taking it to Drive Four Corners the next year, which was 2019. I ripped the engine out of it. I steal an engine from Will, I borrow an engine from Will, that's sitting out that he was planning on putting in his E30 M3 because the first engine he had was always a little tired and didn't do a great job either. So I took that engine, Hamish and I swapped it in one day. We didn't even drop the engine out of the car until like 6:30 at night, and I drove that car home that night. It was pretty impressive. We killed it. I had a Dakar M3 at the time. I still have it. We ripped the suspension off that to lower it. It's currently what's on. It's like Bilstein and H&Rs. I took out the leather door panels. We put in, like, I worked really hard. I put in, we threw in Vader seats. So there's black Vaders inside. There's the M-Tech 2 steering wheel. I got the stereo working. Like, we put in all the work to make the car really great. Had brand new RE71Rs on it. Like it gripped great. We got an alignment. I tried to do an alignment myself after it was lower. It didn't really turn out too good. We took it to Les Schwab, and they did an okay job. The car was drivable, but it was still a little squirrely at higher speeds, especially if you were like in the wet. But it was great. We had a great weekend. I was in this car. Zach was in a Phoenix yellow E36 M3 convertible that I had. Will was in his Daytona Violet E36 M3, which now Zach has. And then Hamish was playing camera car with the 540 wagon, the E34 Heidi. So it was a blast. And then Nam rode with Hamish so we could get awesome shots. And that was a really fun trip. We had a whole lot of fun, and I just really fell in love with this car. Before that, I was always planning on turboing this car when I found out it was special, and I was going back and forth. Is this like a reason to is this a car to turbo, or is this a car to leave exactly how it is? Because it might be worth more someday because it has rare spec. I had the turbo E36, the white one, and that car ripped. You guys have seen it. But I was like, M52 B28, the S52, it's B32. It's 3.2 liter versus 2.8. It's just gonna make more power, better to turbo. Bigger is better. My plan was that. So after drive 4 corners, we bring it back. I return Will's engine. We rebuild the engine. We don't rebuild the engine. We put a head on the other engine. We put an L-ring head gasket. I only want to make like 700 horsepower, so we don't go out MLS. We put ARP studs in it, and I'm like, yeah, this is the engine I'm going to turbo. This is what we got. Well, it never really ran right after that. I never really tried to drive it. It ran, but it was leaking some oil and stuff, and we ended up just parking it. This was maybe October of last year, so a little over a year ago. And it's just sat since then. As you can see by the interior, there's still chips and CDs and just random junk sitting in the car from the Drive 4 Corners trip. We just never cleaned it out. The time has now come. We're starting a new build with this car, and it's going to be pretty wild. I don't know enough of the specs to give them all to you. I have consulted many people for how we're going to go about doing this, and I don't want to mess up any of that stuff. I've kind of trusted other people on this one. We're going to be doing a lot of the work to put it together. Long story short is a smaller bore than an S52. The block is starting life as an M50 and 84 millimeter, but it's going to get a little bit bigger. We're going to go for one of the biggest single turbos that you can get in like the T4 flange variety. We don't have a company that we're going to use yet. Reaching out just if there's any help we can get there, but it'll probably be a Garrett G42. What's going to be crazy though is we're going to go with a DCT transmission out of a new F80 is our plan in that controller. So it's no longer going to be a manual transmission. It's going to be a dual clutch, like that you find in like a new McLaren or something. So it's going to be pretty wild, and we're shooting for pretty far north of 1,000 horsepower when it's all said and done. I want to strip the car completely when we do things. So repaint the entire exterior, repaint the engine bay. I'm going to have to redo most of the interior. The Vader seats are going to go. I still want it to be a street car. We're striving to keep AC in this, but I do need a full cage and a really well done cage for this. There's a local company here called Missile Works. Haven't reached out to them yet, but I've been recommended them by a ton of different people. I want a full interior, full accessible interior, and still have a cage that's say legal to an 8.5 second quarter mile pass or above 200 miles an hour, and maybe a land speed record to give you guys a little bit of clue of what we're trying to do with this car. I would like this to kind of be my halo German car, that it does everything and does pretty much everything well, and then can be driven every day. And with the DCT, you can put it in auto mode and anybody can drive it and it'll be fine. We're actually gonna drop this car off at John's today. We kind of rushed this video a little bit. We've been talking about doing more of this type video. I need to get home and this needs to get there, so this is what we got. He's gonna start working on the setup right now. So it might be a couple months because it's gonna kind of be a back burner thing for him, but that saves a little money for me, and I need to buy a lot of parts to continue this. The engine, the block is actually already at the machine shop. It's been there for a little bit. We're line honing it. We have a torque plate. Pistons are purchased. I have the crank. It's going to be using a standard S52 crank, which if you guys didn't know is the same crank that's in an M54, so an E36 B30. They're identical part numbers. And then I think they're Molnar rods, and then I forget what the pistons are, but they're wild. I don't want to like do it any injustice, so we'll do a separate video on the engine when that starts getting put together, but it's going to be wild. But John's going to be doing all of Going to make a manifold specifically for this car, for this turbo application. The intercooler is going to be made for this car, for this application. He's never built anything this much horsepower in an E36 chassis before, so we're going to see everything we can do. He's pretty convinced we can keep AC, which I'm stoked about. And then we're going to go a little bit wild on the intake manifold setup too. That's all going to have to be custom. Main reason that we need an electronic throttle body for the DCT controller, so they can unload the throttle quickly between shifts. I'm leaning towards that since we're building a custom intake manifold anyway. Why don't we run S54 ITBs, and then I can run an E46 pedal. There's going to be changes as we go for a lot of this stuff, but I think that's what we're leaning for as of today. So we're going to go drop it off. It's probably not going to see it for a bit. We might go do updates here and there, but I got to imagine it's going to be a couple months before this car is back in our shop. If you guys like these kind of videos, I would love to make videos on all of my cars like this, ones that you've seen, ones that you haven't seen, just to get everybody caught up. We're at 10K subscribers, and there's some of our videos that we have like really cool cars that have like 400 views because they were a year and a half ago and nobody ever saw them. So I just assume everybody knows because I put it on YouTube, but realistically, no, that wasn't done. So like the car that's directly above us right here. If you want to see more of these videos, we can make a lot of them. We could sit back, we could drink some beer, you could drink some beer with us. Well, let us know. So we're just dropping it off with Nathan. There's no John around. But there's some cool cars. There's a 930 with or no, I think it's a 964, so like a early 90s 911. But it's got 930 body work on it, so it's a wide body. It's all-wheel drive, turbo. Apparently, it makes some jam. It's a good car. And there's a Diablo over there. I don't know how you guys feel about those. I'm not a big fan, but John is headers for it. It's kind of cool. It's a roadster, so they don't have vents in the trunk lid. So the exhaust cooked all the cats and fried everything, and all the welds broke on the actual exhaust. So I hired John to make new headers for it.
It looks pretty sitting though.
They are cool looking. I'll give you that.
Cool looking, yeah.
I'll never own one. All right, so we dropped it off here at John's. If you guys need any fabrication stuff, especially like exhaust, turbo stuff, hit up VIE. It's VI Engineered. It's John's company. They ship nationwide. They build stuff for VAC. I mean, he's building an exhaust for a Lamborghini. Like, he does good stuff. So appreciate you guys watching, and yeah, stay tuned for more.